And this is a great scene to show it does not matter how you morally package it. It does not matter how you justify it. It matters that it exists. And then it becomes a viable, accessible, normalized means to an end. And that's what we should be problematizing.
Welcome back, everybody, to Former Feds and Friends, a chance for all of us to look at pop culture through a bit of a critical lens, through all the things that we care about in the world of nerdy and interesting. I'm Jeff Sizemore, and I'm the former Deputy Director of the Office of Security and Human Rights at the State Department and the former Senior Advisor on Atrocity Prevention, currently serving as the 2026 Mary Ming Wing Senior Human Rights Fellow for the Asia Pacific Center on the Responsibility to Protect. I am joined, thankfully, by my dear friend Saghar. She is a scholar practitioner, specifically on transitional justice. She's the founder of Collaborative Social Change and the founding partner and mediator of Mediated Solutions. Saghar, so good to talk to you. So good to have you. And welcome to our conversation about Watchmen.
Thank you, Jeff, and to the whole team. This has been a very different experience. Honestly, I haven't really watched much sci-fi or any fantasy, have never watched Watchmen. I think I was just overwhelmed with just how many layers of analysis there were. And I also didn't know how political a lot of these movies are. So it was a refreshing and pleasantly surprising. Overall, I think the whole question and the core dilemma that you're dealing with throughout the movie is who is legitimate in using violence and to what ends, right? And so there's those that want to pursue peace, but absolutely using violence, the Watchmen themselves. And there's also this, the bad guys, the evil perpetrators of violence, and those that benefit from a highly militarized international system, which is absolutely relevant to our current global order. And I'm very much looking forward to digging in. So thanks for having me.
Lack of action in Eastern Europe proves that the Soviet Union's aggression at the Afghan border will not be opposed publicly by the United States. The Soviet Union continued its recent series of military exercises, conducting a bomb test today in the Bering Sea, just 1,500 miles off the southern coast of Alaska. As a result of the Soviet activity, the watchdog group of nuclear scientists moved the doomsday clock up to 5 minutes until midnight. Destruction by nuclear war.
The Soviets would never risk going to war when we have a walking nuclear deterrent on our side.
Maybe the reason why the Soviets are doing these bomb tests is because they feel threatened by Dr. Manhattan.
If you're going to sort of set what's at stake, certainly setting the bar plenty high.
Yeah, and sadly, you could have just replaced Russia with Iran, and we have the current debate that's going on. It's I guess it hit too close to home watching that particular scene and brought up a lot of anger. I mean, it reminded me of so many things. Unfortunately, right now, Iranians are fighting for freedom in Iran right now, and the state-sponsored violence by the Islamic Republic of Iran against their own citizens is so egregious. It's hard to even speak about it, but we should. Within that globalized debate about whether or not international intervention should happen, you have Iran being depicted as this like nuclear power, which is absolutely contested. And, the stakes are high when you're talking about nuclear power. Especially the way it's depicted in the movie where you would just watch people turning into dust. That is essentially what will happen. Well, how bad could it get? That is essentially the worst case scenario. But to what extent is it a distraction? And is it helpful to those that are, beneficiaries of the militarized international system to justify hyper-militarization?
Tonight, a comedian died in New York. Somebody knows why.
It all started with the gangs. People tend to forget that. Pirate outfits, ghosts. They thought it was funny. Dress up and pull heists. Of course, as soon as we arrest them, they'd be back on the street again. Nobody could pick them out of the lineup because of the damn masks. So, few of us cops, we get together and we figure, what the heck? We'll mask up too. We'll finish what the law couldn't. Pretty soon, papers get wind of it, they ran with it.
We see here a few police officers who take it upon themselves to become quote unquote superheroes by putting on masks effectively deputizing themselves as vigilantes to answer a nebulous concern about gangs, certainly operating extrajudicially, and with what level of oversight?
And honestly, it reminds me of the challenges in transitional justice, because there is a significant portion of people that want to use violence to stop violence. And it actually reminds me of a massive debate that we're having here and I guess across many Iranian diaspora communities around what do you do with Islamic Republic of Iran authorities that have committed so many atrocities against Iranians. What do we do with these people? The more atrocities happened and the more egregious and horrific they become, you see an increase in number of folks that really want that eye for an eye or kind of vengeful type of justice. But it's different because they're doing it to stop the bad guys, eradicate the bad guys. There's something different there, right? And unfortunately, and I'm going to say something very unpopular, and I say it with love and as a sister. Sorry. That cares about her nation, that cares about her people, and crucially, I care most about preventing recurrence. And so what we have to do, whether we're thinking about Sudan, Congo, Iran, Palestine, settler colonial arrangements, you name it, we have to stop thinking about the perpetrators and the victims/survivors and who's assuming those roles, and instead figure out how do you get rid of the norm of violence that connects these actors. And unfortunately, the justice process cannot make use of violence if you want to eradicate that. And it's the same with these so-called watchmen or vigilantes that want to, make sure that those that are harming folks stop. You are essentially becoming what you want to eradicate, so it's not going to be eradicated. It's very frustrating, but also understandable, because I grew up in violence. I get why it's an attractive means to an end. I get it. And I have used it. But it is important for us to understand long-term what it is we're doing, which is just reinforcing more of the same thing we hate.
Daniel, look at this.
Is this bean juice?
Human bean juice. Badge belonged to the comedian. Blood, too. He's dead.
I heard he'd been working for the government since '77, knocking over Marxist republics in South America. Maybe it was a political killing or something.
Maybe someone's picking off costumed heroes.
Their initial mission of protecting is co-opted now to retribution. They're knocking over Marxist republics, what they intended as, cleaning up their streets or whatever. It's amazing how quickly that slippery slope leads to a wide scale of the buffet of violence.
I love that.
The comedian made a lot of enemies over the years, even among his friends.
Speaking of friends, how's Hollis Mason? He wrote that book. Said some bad things about the comedian in it.
I don't like what you're implying, and I like being followed even less.
Maybe I was keeping an eye on you, in case someone's gunning for masks.
There is a trope that shows up across many of the different sort of superhero stories that their relative strength and their arrival on the scene therefore begets an equal response back. Vision makes the point that it was only once Tony Stark becomes Iron Man that the interstellar threats that eventually become kind of the existential threat against the Avengers are because now there is strength for them to push back upon. Obviously, as the Watchmen are sort of stepping up and becoming bigger, there is then a sort of a pushback. And this all ties back to the idea that if violence is going to be the means in which you're going to solve it, violence in return, violence coming back from the other side will rise to meet that. And that you keep playing the cat and mouse game of defense and deterrence and defense and deterrence. And that only keeps upping the level.
And this is a great scene to show it does not matter how you morally package it. It does not matter how you justify it. It matters that it exists, and then it becomes a viable, accessible, normalized means to an end. And that's what we should be problematizing.
I think the current moment where we're seeing entrenchment, we're seeing increased spending on defense, and we're seeing the complete eradication of the peace building budget globally, and that only keeps upping the level, speaks to, well, if we do I'm the one in charge of the violence, then it's okay, and it's for the right reasons. And as a retired military officer, some of the great wins of World War I and World War II are some of the things that we're most proud of and most laudatory towards. We ended the concentration camps and ending the Holocaust is a moment of great pride. And yet, I think we've seen that violence has continued to perpetuate and that there have been like the continuing cycles. And if the way that you fix it is violence and intervention, are you merely just setting the stage for the next version of that? And how do you stop the cycle across the longer reaches of history?
I know why you're here. Eddie Blake's funeral is today. Finally got his punchline, I guess. Poor Eddie.
Poor Eddie after what he did to you?
Lori, you're still young. You don't know. Things change. Things are tough all over, Cupcake. It rains on the just and the unjust alike. The comedian has a little bit of both. And he always thought he'd get the last laugh.
I very much judged Miss Jupiter for forgiving her mom so quickly. And I think we do this a lot when it comes to how women that do experience intimate partner violence or sexual violence would like to handle the situation. There is a very clear-cut example, or I guess model, of call out the perpetrator, make sure that they're prosecuted, make sure they get jail time. And we know that that's not the majority response or desire from many victims of intimate partner violence and sexual violence. If I'm wearing my, scholar practitioner hat, just looking at, what would help to deter, what would help to make an example out of this man, what would maybe help to literally instill fear in others from committing such acts, yes, that visibility and prosecution and making an example might absolutely help. But is it justice if the victim themselves doesn't want that? As much as we have our ideas on what should happen in those contexts, I think making sure that we center the views of the woman and the experience of the woman that lived through it and understanding why she wants the approach to justice that she wants is, I think, a far more sophisticated approach to justice than throw him in jail, how dare you be okay with him, because it doesn't deal with the complex dynamics of that kind of violence, and it ignores all the variables or most of the variables that someone might be factoring in when they're making these decisions. So yeah, I had kind of this, oh my gosh, why is this on, in this movie at all? It's totally normalizing it. But I was also really in tune with how do these women respond, and specifically Sally, what does justice look like for her? Why isn't she pursuing justice? Why is she okay with this person? And I checked my own judgment.
Welcome to the first ever meeting.
This is all bullshit. Watchmen. That's the real joke. Didn't work 15 years ago, sure as hell ain't gonna work now, just because you want to keep playing cowboys and Indians.
Look, Rorschach and I have made real headway on the gang problem by working together.
We can do so much more. We can save this world with the right leadership.
Yeah. And that'd be you, right, Ozzy? I mean, hell, you're the smartest man on the planet.
It doesn't take a genius to see the world has problems.
Yeah, but it takes a room full of morons who think they're small enough for you to handle.
The right leadership, Ozymandias' belief, Adrian's belief that he sees the way and he understands and he's the answer to such things. The one vision is the one, and we're going to get everybody else on board, even if it's by force. I don't want to say this out loud, but I will. It reminds me of liberal democracies and how they fight wars, how war is justified because it's in the name of human rights. It's in the name of liberal democracy. When Adrian said, right leadership, I mean, liberal democracies believe that they're the right leaders for the free world, the whole world. That, we now understand just how much damage that mentality has brought to the world over the last 10 plus years, if not more. And so it brings us back to the question of who gets to decide how to make use of force. Unfortunately, in this state-centric international system, states are the ones that have a legitimate monopoly over the use of force. And so where does that leave us if we have so many state-sponsored atrocities across this world? What's next? And I do think it's gonna be a completely bottom-up design of a global government to be radical about it.
That's how you want to do it?
this up.
Congress is pushing through some new bill that's gonna outlaw masks. Our days are numbered. Till then, it's like you always say, we're society's only protection.
From what?
Kidding me? From themselves.
What happened to the American dream?
What happened to the American dream? It came true. You're looking at it.
Several comments by the comedian and Adrian throughout the whole movie where they're talking about, really the human condition, what our, I guess, hardwiring is predetermined to do. And I think that they depict us as savages, that, violence is an instinct. Violence is something that is very normal. And I have huge problems with that because I think that's what the international or military industrial complex wants us to think and is so good at pumping out through various mediums. And so that part of it really, I think, got to me as well, where it's just this ontological assumption about the nature of existence, where people are just predisposed to be violent. This is who we are, and we have to accept that as fact. And then I thought about, military training, how harsh it is, and how much it takes to get a seemingly non-violent or everyday citizen to be ready for violence and be ready to be taken out. I know you have a military background, and I would love for you to speak to that, because I also think, with the high level of suicide rates among former military service people, the high usage of drugs while you are in combat, all of this indicates to me this is not natural, that this is very unnatural, and the human condition actually is probably to be peaceful, or at least to avoid any kind of brute force or physical violence, unless you're experiencing an existential threat. Then of course, it's fight, flight, or freeze, or all those options.
Training people to accept violence, the first couple hours of boot camp, they intentionally sleep deprive you, and you're getting screamed at, and you're dislocated from your location. And there was a moment when I was standing at attention and my entire body was shaking, and I couldn't do anything about it because it was just completely a involuntary psychosomatic response. And though I knew what was happening, because I was bright enough to understand they're going to break us down, then they'll build us back up again, and cohesion, the actual physical response was still incredibly clear. And I still have a few of the nicks and scrapes from the first time I was trying to shave my face with a shaking hand, because of just, it was 4 o'clock in the morning and I'd had an hour of sleep in the past 48 and I was being screamed at in the snow. It did what it was supposed to do. I think there's some fascinating questions about what the expectations are and then what the second and third order effects are from that.
I think what I was really intrigued by was almost the eroticism and pleasure attached to inflicting violence. And it reappeared many times. I believe it's Miss Jupiter is her name. I think she manifested it the most. And you could see that she would have these kind of internal thoughts that you don't have access to, but then you could see on her facial expressions or just how she moved her body, or how, she was depicted in a scene, that she's really getting off, so to speak, on violence, whether it's, the man she's attracted to doing it or herself doing it. Even the gentleman, Dan, there it is, Dan, they have a scene where, he's having some difficulty being intimate, and then they go out and beat up a bunch of people, and then all of a sudden they're good to go. It's one thing to depict these realities and have us reflect on them and navigate it, but there is this kind of subtext and messaging that I fear, unfortunately, for young people would make violence very attractive and normalize it.
Adrian, we know everything.
And what's there to discuss, Dan?
Plenty. You killed comedian.
Blake figured it out first. Nixon had him keeping tabs on us, making sure we weren't rocking the boat. I had to kill him.
We were supposed to make the world a better place.
Dan, that's exactly what I am doing.
Nuclear war, human extinction.
course, my moral safeguards gave me pause as a necessary sacrifice. 15 million people killed by Dr. Manhattan himself. The world's punishment for flirting with World War III. You see, the comedian was right. Humanity's savage nature will inevitably lead to global annihilation. So in order to save this planet, I had to trick it with the greatest practical joke in human history.
Killing millions.
To save billions.
It really brings up this bigger philosophical question for me of, should we be emphasizing that we need watchmen? That we need these folks that enforce law or that keep us in check or that regulate our behavior? And I think we've done that, right? For centuries, we've done that. We've seen that model, and here we are. And it comes to, I think it boils down to that question of, okay, who watches the Watchmen, and how far do we go with that? As much as we would like to think that external checks and balances, this is where the answers lie for atrocities prevention, I think more upstream and proactive prevention, which is really looking at, well, how do you actually create structures and norms that make atrocity violence almost impossible? One of those things I would argue that we have to focus on is moving away from external checks to the internal. You can see across the world the evidence that if somebody believes in something, they will take a bullet for it. That strength of belief is the best check and balance, but we still invest in the external.
I was having a conversation with colleagues specifically about how we had done development previously, with this being former feds and friends, and the number of steps necessary to track the money and show that every dollar was accounted for, with the assumption behind that being the money is eventually going to be misused. So you must put all of this architecture in place to ensure it's not, instead of the assumption it's going to be used for the right thing. And
exactly.
That a certain amount of flexibility is okay, and that it's not, the juice is not worth the squeeze for the sheer amount of administrative burden, where you end up doing all overhead and not actually doing what the program intended, specifically because of the belief that someone's going to steal the money and they're going to misuse it. And sure, that happens, but does that have to be the baseline assumption? Does that have to be the foundation upon which the system is built?
And to piggyback that, we often overlook and dismiss the toll it takes on the individual. So you pointed out the systemic issues. I'm going to point out how much harm it causes to those that are watching, right? The child protection worker. Great job. No, they go in with these ideas about helping and protecting and working with families. They find out, no, I'm just here to tear families apart. There's this idea that if we have the right infrastructure and system, then this kind of watchdog mentality will work itself out. But I also think about the human toll that it takes on your psyche, your just your mental health, your physical health. And you see it across child protection, policing. It's this whole idea of pitting people against each other. And that tension in and of itself is going to cause harm to somebody that's in the position of authority, kind of so-called watching and checking people. I essentially would package where we're at, this historical moment, as a global norms war. All of the issues that we've talked about, it's really about norms. And what is norms? It's essentially standards set within the group context, within society, that tells people what's good or bad behavior, what's acceptable behavior, what's expected of you, and also what's seen as unacceptable behavior. So what's normalized, right? When I think about the theater of that global norms war, it's really everywhere. It does start in the home. And I think the movie shows that with some intimate partner violence as well. It starts in our minds as well, our thoughts. It's all over the place. And so when we think about what is the theater of war, it's everywhere. And that should be, as much as it's overwhelming and hard maybe to grasp, it's also liberating. And it means that every context, every interaction could be a site of activism. And so I'm excited that this is a way of thinking about what we can do to exercise our own agency in this global norms war, where I see the people really, if you're thinking about what are the sides of this war, it's the people and the masses against those that are benefiting from the militarized international system. And if you're not benefiting from it, I'm sure you're suffering from it. So consider yourself a part of the people and activate yourself in any way you possibly can to combat any norms that make violence more acceptable, make it almost inevitable. Some of the concrete ways you could do this, I'd say, is even in our thinking and how we interact, I don't think we do enough truth telling about where we're at. We often do truth telling after atrocities. We document what happened, or we write up reports, we have truth commissions, etc. But what we don't do is we're not honest with ourselves and with each other about the thoughts we're having and the ways that we want to behave that might make, our world less safe and more violent. And so I think Miss Jupiter she exhibited in a couple of scenes what I mean when you're thinking about the mindset. When she's looking at pressing the buttons, for example, she knows that she's going to press a fire button and she might cause some damage, but she grinned and she did it anyway. She did it anyway. Or you have, the mentalities of the comedian and Adrian, where they see themselves as better than, or that they're able to use violence in a way that's good or for good. This type of thinking, the beliefs that we hold, often we don't necessarily want to share it with each other. This truth telling in every day about how we think and how we want to behave and how we do behave is really where I think we should. Speaking truth is very difficult. Not just because you might be reprimanded, but also just judgment. And so if we don't normalize truth telling, if we don't normalize making mistakes so that we can grow, we're basically going to be just spinning the hamster wheel.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Birjandian, for being able to join us. Thank you, Saghar, as my friend, for this great conversation. For our viewers out there, obviously, we want to hear what you're thinking about, and we would love to see your responses in the comments. Please do continue to provide sort of that feedback. We are obviously paying attention, and continue to give us options as far as what else you would like to see us talk about. Until the next time, thanks so very much for joining Former Feds and Friends, and we look forward to the next video.
Let's throw rocks in the house.